All right. I think everyone is live. Everything's good to go. We have three really great speakers today. We're going to have Paul Puey from AirBitz. Everyone is live. Everything's good to go. And what we're going to do is just kind of go around the room and us and the UF Bitcoin just kind of introduce ourselves. So my name is UF. My name is Lapscher, and I'm the president of the UF Bitcoin Club, and I'm really excited to be able to put this event together. We have some really great speakers today, and I'm surrounded by a really great executive board. Aaron?
Hey, nice. I'm very happy all of you can make it today. We're going to have a great speaker session. We're going to touch on some of the most important topics in cryptocurrency at the moment. And I founded this club to kind of give back to the university, have a place in Gainesville, Florida, where students can get educated and kind of network with professionals like yourselves. So I think this is a great opportunity to do so. So thank you again for being here.
Yep. Hey, I'm Antonio. I'm the vice president of the club here at University of Florida. I'm very excited to have you guys here. Thanks for accepting the invitation. I all did a great job here. And yeah, thank you. And I'm excited to ask you some great questions.
Hi, my name is Nathan. I'm the treasurer and kind of do the technical stuff for this club. And I'm just really excited to hear what you have to say about the questions that we asked.
Hey guys, so I'm Brandon. I'm one of the members on the executive board and just kind of helping to grow this club. And thank you so much for your patience today and coming out and having this virtual conference with us. It means a lot for our young group at UF, and there's so many passionate students here who are really trying to get our feet going on the ground with this. So thank you for taking the time out today.
So thank you so much everyone for the introductions. Our first panelist today is Paul Puey. Paul is a proud electroengineering and computer science graduate from UC Berkeley with a wide range of technical skills, from low-level 3D graphics engineering to development of custom web CMS systems, even before people knew what CMS was. And I feel that here with this chat today, feel that blockchain is an upcoming technology. Seems a little fitting because not a lot of people know about blockchain, but here we are today. He has led an engineering position with NVIDIA and Chromatic Research, but has mostly owned and operated several non-technical small businesses throughout California. There, he learned the importance of intersection of people, business, and technology. Today, Paul aims to bring Bitcoin mainstream with software and products aimed at simplifying Bitcoin and making it insanely easy to send and secure the revolutionary currency while maintaining the highest level of privacy. When not converting people to Bitcoin, you'll likely find him at a rock gym in Joshua Tree or at a local gym.
Cool. Thanks much. Been a while since I heard that little bio.
Lexy Prodromos. Lexy graduated with honors with a degree in political science from Pepperdine University and holds a certificate in conflict management from Pepperdine's #1 ranked Strauss Institute of Discipline Resolution. Her interest in the nexus of emerging technologies and the law led her to conduct research on smart contracts and subsequently hold discussions with the foremost legal and blockchain scholars in the US and the UK. Here at the UF Bitcoin Club, we had a workshop led by Nathan, which we did smart contracts, so it's going to be great.
Terrific.
She was also one of the original initiators of the Illinois Blockchain Initiative, and currently the only external non-government affiliated member of the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology's Blockchain Working Group, and the executive director of the new Chicago Blockchain Center. She's also a candidate for Masters in Information Systems from Northwestern University.
Thank you so much for having me, y'all.
And our last panelist for today is Simon Lapscher. Simon is in the enterprise delivery team at ConsenSys, focused on building Ethereum-based production systems for large clients. He was previously at Deloitte Consulting, where he created and co-led their US blockchain lab and internal blockchain community. Prior to this, he was a technology and strategy consultant specializing in the payments industry. Simon is originally from Caracas, Venezuela, went to school at Georgia Tech, and currently lives in Atlanta. He's a jazz pianist and loves music, backpacking, rafting, and learning. One more fun fact is that Simon is my cousin. So I'm delighted to see my cousin Simon here today.
Awesome.
So the first question that we have for the panelists is, what brought you into the world of blockchain? And we'll go ahead and get started with Simon. Can you take the first one?
Yeah, definitely. So I got into this world in early 2013 when I found out about Bitcoin. I started reading about this magical digital money and that I didn't understand and that seemed too good to be true. And as I read more and more about it, I realized its potential, and actually went back to Deloitte and said, is anyone talking about this at Deloitte? And no one actually was. So I started that conversation with a few other interested people, and I think it was initially this this idealistic view of the world, of anything and everything that blockchain technology could impact. As 2013 evolved and 2014 came, and people started, I started hearing talks about Vitalik and Ethereum and just the broader sense of the blockchain ecosystem. I realized its true potential, and that's when I actually, became very, very passionate about it.
Thank you, Simon. That was great. If Lexy, you can answer again, what brought you into the world of blockchain? We see that you're a leader in Illinois and you're part of Bloq. So talk to us a little about your passion, how you stumbled upon it.
Yeah, and first of all, I wanted to say again, thank you so much for having me on this panel. Your fellow panelists are incredible, and I'm absolutely honored to be among them speaking to you guys today. I think it's great what you guys are doing at UF to see passion at the undergraduate level for this cryptocurrency and technology in general. So just kudos to you guys for putting this together as well. But so I as was kind of alluded to in my introduction, I graduated from Pepperdine with a degree in political science, intending to become a lawyer, and I was interested primarily in technology's disruption of the legal space, and so that kind of brought me into looking at different technologies that were impacting the law in different ways. And in my research, I stumbled upon smart contracts and started researching that. So my story is a little less conventional in that I sort of started researching the blockchain applications to our world, as opposed to coming from a cryptocurrencies perspective. I had probably first heard of Bitcoin in late 2014, so relatively late for this space. Because most of my, I have most of my family is in Greece, and so there are many of my cousins there who were telling me about it. And at first I somewhat dismissed it, thought it was a little bit of a, like, what is this? Is it just, what's the difference between, this and Venmo or something like that? Those were my initial thoughts. How is this digital currency going to possibly replace things as strong as the dollar or the euro? But as I began to research it more, I discovered that part of it's just the technology that it uses, blockchain specifically, could not only be applied to the financial sector and financial services, but in many other industries as well, including law. So that is kind of where I got my start. And I, after attending ConsenSys last year and hearing Governor Jack Markell's speech about his Delaware blockchain initiative. I'm a Chicago native. Despite taking a brief respite from our winter weather in California for a few years, found myself drawn back to Chicago when I started my master's last year, and wanted to make Chicago a center and a hub for technological innovation. And I thought a great way to do that would be to capitalize on this new and evolving blockchain technology. And so I was part of the team behind launching our Illinois Blockchain Initiative, which we released at our first Chicago Blockchain Conference last November 30th. And since then, we've been doing many things, from developing regulatory policy. We released an RFI, request for information, trying to find use cases for government of blockchain technology, and then are now trying to develop the ecosystem in Chicago as well, the blockchain startup ecosystem, with our new Chicago Blockchain Center set to launch within the next month or so. But yeah, that's my story.
I really appreciate how, you and Simon, for example, come from two different backgrounds. Simon from engineering, you from political science, and you both stumbled upon this technology. It's going to be interesting. Paul, we see here that you're leading one of the most famous Bitcoin wallets. And fun fact, my first and only Bitcoin wallet is AirBitz.
Cool, thank you.
So you must have been a pioneer in finding this Bitcoin technology, blockchain technology. So if you could just address what brought you into the world and answer the question.
Yeah, sure. Sounds like 2013 was a magic year for the three panelists here, and it was same year for me as well. Early 2013 is when I discovered Bitcoin, and it completed full circle almost the entire history of my life and everything that I was interested in. Starting from technology, obviously I graduated with an engineering degree, so the technology blew my mind. It was amazing both from technical point of view and also from a ability to merge technology with human game theory. That's what I really think is really powerful about Bitcoin. But in addition to that, with my almost decade of time taking a break from technology and instead going into small business and business in general, during that time I found how a lot of businesses and how they interface with the financial system, especially the payment system, being significantly to their disadvantage. The fees, the chargebacks that you have to deal with, cash, fraudulent and counterfeit money, all of that was already in my mind before I had discovered Bitcoin. And I was already frustrated by that system in and of itself, but I felt like I couldn't do anything about it. As well, one of the industries that I'd gone into in business was the health and wellness space. And there I started to become disenfranchised with what I found was kind of large establishment and how they would educate the population. And I found that the larger the establishment, the more disinformation was dispelled onto the greater population, basically how we should live, what is the truth of behind kind of the closed doors. And you combine the technical background that I had, the kind of frustration with payment systems and financial network through my experience in small business, and then also seeing kind of the large establishment creating a lot of mistruth to general population, especially in the health and wellness space and going into the financial space, and how that I saw how that tied so much into money and control of money and how that affected legislation. When I discovered Bitcoin, it fully clicked. It all came together. The technology, the ability to really bring a lot of the empowerment back to kind of the small businesses, the individual, other countries outside of the established kind of powerhouses. And I couldn't put it down. I became the worst employee at my last job. And I had to quit for the respect of my job because this is all I could think about. And the good thing is I'm not just a technologist, but someone that took a break from technology and became a user versus just a developer. So one of our goals with AirBitz has been to really make the cryptography and the challenging new aspect of cryptocurrency as familiar to people. And we define familiar, ease of use by what's familiar, making it feel like what people have been using with mobile apps and websites for the past decade. And that's been our focus. And I'm super excited to be in this space. I feel like I couldn't be in technology unless I was in blockchain.
I feel like the planets aligned for the time that you discovered it and your skill set and your background.
Exactly.
And it has yielded a really great Bitcoin wallet. And
cool.
I guess shameless plug and giving it some praise here. I'm going to actually turn it over to Aaron and give the first question that we have lined up for today.
Hey, so I guess we've been talking a lot about how Bitcoin is very central to this ecosystem as a whole. And I mean, I guess it's something that no matter the background, all of us have in common. So do you see Bitcoin as being, and this is for all of you, do you see Bitcoin as being the first global currency? And do you think that a nimbler alternative currency will ever take this role? And do you think there will ever be such a thing stemming from Bitcoin or blockchain technology?
I mean, I would say that Bitcoin's not the first global currencies. We've had other cross-border currencies before, but they've never really been digital. So I think that's the power of Bitcoin, is that it's the first digital global currency, or has the potential to be the first digital. Actually, I'd say it already is the first digital global currency that isn't owned by any specific border. So that is disruptive in and of itself. And I'm trying to remember the second part of your question, but that in and of itself is a piece of why it's so powerful, because anybody can access it. And I think we've said this over and over again. People have heard this become almost cliche, but it is empowering different countries, different individuals, those that don't have access to a digital currency ecosystem, by empowering them to take part in a global economy.
Yeah, and I completely agree, Paul. But I think to add, I would just say that, you know, it depends on what you consider global. Obviously, this is Bitcoin is completely non-entity. You know, no one non-central, decentralized. No one owns it. But will it reach, you know, the global scale of everybody in the world is using Bitcoin to pay for their things? Most likely not. And if it does, you won't know, right? Because what I think needs to happen and will happen is this sort of concept of infrastructure inversion, which Andreas Antonopoulos talks about a lot, which is how do we use the existing infrastructure and the way that people today go about paying for things and using currency to actually onboard users into this digital currency. And then once we have that user base, we flip it around and everybody's using already Bitcoin by default, but they don't even know. So I think my take is that that's what's going to happen. You won't be going and having Bitcoin in your to pay for your coffee, for example, but you might have different niches of like, for example, remittances, which is a clear use case of Bitcoin that is taking off.
Right, and Simon points to a very good point about remittances, something that I was going to mention as well. There's definitely that, and then what Paul mentioned as well about how different kinds of countries are interested in using Bitcoin, where maybe in the US there hasn't been as much adoption, since one of the biggest draws of Bitcoin and digital currencies in general in a lot of countries is that they have a lack of trust in their own governments and in their own financial systems. And so, like my cousins in Greece, Greece has been going through many financial difficulties, as kind of the world has seen for the past 5-6 years, honestly. And so they were seeking out something that they could have as a trusted store of value. So maybe not necessarily for transacting on an everyday usage, and then B as just an alternative to their current currency that they were using. But yeah, I think as far as other currencies that could be used as well, while Bitcoin is fantastic, and I think most of the applications and platforms have been built around Bitcoin, I think it's not going to be the only currency that everyone is going to be using. Nimbler currencies could also take the stage. I think we're probably going to enter into a world where you have Bitcoin as being the majority used, and then other smaller coins being able to interact with Bitcoin. And I think that's going to be important. The interoperability between like a network and basically an ecosystem of different coins is probably where we're headed.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think that with the proliferation of the token economy that we're seeing now with the ERC20 tokens, for example, you have what's going to happen is that different use cases are going to have different tokens. So you'll have the Gnosis, which is a prediction market, right? They have their own token that you will have to use their decentralized application, which is basically a betting market, intelligent betting market. So you will have to use that specific token for that specific application. And that's the initial version of it, how it starts. Basically, there are different tokens for different applications, Bitcoin being the currency application and the cross-border payments application in my mind. But then eventually you'll have to, in order for mass adoption of these token economies to happen, you will have to find a way for the end user to actually not realize at all that all of these exist. It'll have to be more of a way to be fungible and exchangeable into an abstraction layer.
So I'd like to touch on that because I've gone personally back and forth on the concept of whether or not people will know that they're using cryptocurrency. Like, what does it take for us to drive it to the masses? And on one side, I said, yeah, we should hide it with basically interfaces for remittance and payments, and you just swipe a card, just like you normally would with a credit card, and you pay, and you don't realize you realize you're using cryptocurrency. And it really started to dawn on me that I'm starting to feel like that probably won't be the way that it achieves mass adoption. It'll a way that it achieves some adoption. It'll be a portion of its adoption metric. But if we want a truly disruptive technology that really takes a hockey stick in adoption, think of any disruptive technology we've ever used in the past. Did you know you were using it? Almost certainly, yes, you did. Did you know you were using the internet when it became disruptive? Absolutely. You sent that email. You surfed that web page. It's something you absolutely could not do before the internet. Did you know you were using a wheel? That's a disruptive technology, right? Yes, you absolutely knew you were using it. Well, you know that you're using cryptocurrency. Well, if you don't know you're using cryptocurrency, then that is much like using the internet for voice over IP. You're picking up a physical phone, still either using the wheel or pushing buttons and making a phone call. Is that really going to be disruptive? It's a good use case. It'll make for cheaper phone calls. But is that going to be the disruptive technology that people, thousands of, if not hundreds of thousands of people are going to conferences excited about a year? So fundamentally, I do think you're going to be knowing that you're using cryptocurrency, especially with smart contract applications. Those you'll have to a strong degree deal with tokens. You'll have to know that you're spending them. Now, it might become much simpler. The exchanges will be much more fluid. You may have a stack of Bitcoin that just automatically gets converted to these different currencies as needed because the application will do that for you. But you'll be doing things you couldn't do before. And that's when we'll know that we've achieved a level of adoption and you really utilize the technology. It's not that we're doing what we did before, but just a little bit better. But we'll do things we just simply could not do before. And so that's a direction that I've now started to kind of really feel very, very confident about regarding this entire blockchain space.
So I completely agree with that for the majority of the use cases. And this is a blockchain versus, blockchain as a broader term and Bitcoin as the currency, the more so debate, right? That in fact, with the broader set of blockchain applications, 100% that's the case. The user experience is a new one that most people, and the business models that blockchain enables are new models that do not fit your legacy applications and the way that people interact today. But if we're solely talking about point of sale payments, which is a very specific use case, payments today isn't broken, right? I don't think people mind paying with a credit card. And in fact, I worked in payments for a few years, and the reason why most payments start to fail is because payments isn't broken. And this is point of sale. Cross-border is fully broken, which is why Bitcoin's taking off in that space, because it's really interesting. But in order to get mass adoption in the retail payment space, my take is that there's nothing wrong with payments, so we might as well adapt to the existing infrastructure and change it from the inside out.
Thank you, guys. I think that was a really great way of kind of sharing our different viewpoints, different use cases for blockchain applications. And since we're already talking a little about Bitcoin, I think Brendan has a follow-up question.
Hey, so with this increased adoption and increased use for Bitcoin, there comes the question, the size of the blockchain or the block size. It's been a big heated debate recently, and I wanted to get you guys' opinions on the Bitcoin Core versus Bitcoin Unlimited, and see what you guys had to say about that.
Yeah, we're pretty in the thick of that debate, and we've definitely had to listen to a good amount of chatter on both sides, both positive and negative. I think the overarching impression that we have is that both sides have really good ideas and arguments for what they want to implement, the whole unlimited side and the SegWit side. And their arguments really, really break down as soon as they try to crap on one another. As soon as they try to do the negative arguments on the other side, then their argument just starts to break down. And that really goes to show that we have multiple ways of making this car go faster they can work well together, so why crap on the other? It's like saying, well, we can add a bigger engine. Oh, we can also make the tires way more efficient. Well, you can do both. And this is what has really, really frustrated us, our team, is how negative of an environment this has become, where good ideas don't really get to surface to the top anymore because there's so much negativity that's stomped out on them. Now, fundamentally at our company, our stance is we're very for both scaling the block size. We think that it inherently is needed. It absolutely can happen. Miners can afford it. It does not contribute to additional centralization, especially when you factor in that the effective utilization of the block size has been growing, from the viewpoints of when it was 0.1 megabyte to now that it's at 1 megabyte. So we do fundamentally think the block size needs to grow. At the same time, SegWit is a very cool and useful technology, both for block size increase and transaction scalability, as well as some really key fixes that the protocol is needed. So we're behind both of those. One of the key developers of SegWit is Eric Lombroso, who's also based here in San Diego, and we've hosted him in our office, speaking to a meetup of 50, 60 people about SegWit. One of my co-founders, William Swanson, has put out a blog post to help people understand the technical details of SegWit. I think it was actually one of the more educational and easy to understand descriptions as well. So we're pro both technologies. We want both to exist. We're actually agnostic as to which one comes first, but we're really, really disenfranchised by the fact that the argument has gotten so negative, and I really wish people would kind of escape from the negativity and really try to listen to each other and take technology based arguments and also social based arguments, like what is it easy to get people to adopt, and utilize that to drive this forward.
Yeah, I would have to agree with a lot of what Paul is saying, and that at Bloq it's been interesting since one of our co-founders is Jeff Garzik, who was originally a Bitcoin Core developer. So he's been asked ad nauseum about this debate since he was kind of one of the people at the forefront of even the proliferation of Bitcoin. And it's definitely a lot of the technological advances have been overshadowed by sort of the more political aspects of the argument, and it's turned into kind of like what you were referring to, Paul, as more about one side crapping on the other, as opposed to actually trying to seek out which would be best for the technology as a whole. And yeah, it is a shame because there are advantages to both, but how it's turned into more of like a threatening the other side with hard forks and trying to say take control of the currency in essence by trying to claim more support on one side or the other. It's going to be interesting to see how everything develops.
Simon, any take on the debate?
I mean, the only thing I would say is that this needed to get resolved 2 years ago. It's ridiculous that it hasn't yet. I think this desperately needs some non-tech people to come in and do some conflict resolution and actually get people on the table. I think, like, for example, Roger Ver just challenged Samson Moe to a debate, which I think, I mean, besides all of that, I think those are the things that need to be happening right now. Just open debate and not, about the technology and about the best path forward. Obviously, both sides want, a better Bitcoin. And I think that's getting lost in all the fight.
Definitely seeing when either side or any person in the debate starts to falter in their argument, you quickly see mudslinging start to happen where you're just starting to take control. It's all about money, and it's only because you have a conflict of interest. Once you start hearing that coming out of someone's mouth, that's when I usually shut off. And I say, well, clearly your argument's starting to break down because you're having to mudsling at that point in time. And we're at the point where I'm seeing about 80% mudslinging as opposed to, really good thought out arguments. And there's a few you have to filter through, and I do try to filter through and really pick out what are well thought out arguments. And those are what I will retweet and what I'll favorite, what I'll forward out, and what I'll say on my own. But sure enough, you'll get a lot of mudslinging from anything that I might say that tries to really pick and choose some of the well thought out arguments, just because it's going to upset somebody, you know. And I find that the people it upsets are also the squeaky wheels. They're the loudest ones. They've got mud in their hand ready to throw. So it is unfortunate. There is, like, we're clearly surrounded by many different cryptocurrencies, and I think for anyone to think that Bitcoin has a stranglehold long term, I mean, I'm very, very pro Bitcoin. I definitely own a good sizable chunk of Bitcoin. Our whole staff is paid in Bitcoin, and right now AirBitz supports, you know, exclusively Bitcoin in the wallet. But I think it would be short-sighted to say that it has a stranglehold indefinitely forever. You know, that would, and I think there's some of that kind of sentiment in the Bitcoin space now that is scarily sounding a lot like legacy banking, where yeah, you know, we don't need to change because, you know, we're the biggest, we're the most stable. Well, it starts to sound exactly what a bank says, and it's true. It's very hard to move that. There's a lot of momentum behind Bitcoin, but be forewarned that things can topple. It might take time, but it can topple. I hope it doesn't, and I hope we were able to resolve this. But you know, it wouldn't surprise me.
All right, thank you. I have here the next question. So do you believe that the blockchain technology will not only revolutionize the world's financial industry, but also have other great potential in other industries?
Yeah, so 100%. I mean, blockchain is completely a cross-industry application. It basically serves or will serve as the underlying infrastructure for all value-based assets. So wherever there's a value-based, you know, asset that today depends on centralized entities to provide trust, that blockchain will disrupt that industry. So we are actually at ConsenSys already, our production applications, most of them are not in the financial space. So we implemented a decentralized exchange for energy, where we're able to tokenize, you know, electrons and have people interact with a local grid to sell, buy and sell excess of energy, right? And so these are the types of applications that will take off big. And for, you know, another example would be provenance and, you know, of assets. So supply chain, and we actually have an application with the largest mining company to basically provide end-to-end tracking for oil, right? Oil samples. So, you know, I can talk on and on about the different applications that blockchain has, but I think it's not at all a financial, just financially focused technology. I think the financial application, the financial sector picked it up faster just because they sensed the threat in Bitcoin, and they sense the threat in the decentralization of things like the DTCC and the clearing and settlement of assets. But it goes way beyond that.
Right, and just piggybacking off of that, I definitely agree that the financial sector is where we've heard the most energy and the most interest, a little bit out of fear and just FOMO, frankly, and just making sure that they wanted to stay on top of this new technology that could possibly be a threat to them. But I actually think that it's better suited for many other industries outside of the financial industry. Supply chain was mentioned. Anytime you have multiple entities working together that need to be able to use the same networks and not have to trust each other, there's an application for blockchain. So that's very broad, and I think it can be far-reaching across industries. You know, from even there's been exploration in the entertainment and music industry. So there's a ton of application and a ton of energy that's been in the blockchain technology space, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how that's applied from a pragmatic point of view. There's, you know, obviously blockchain is not a end-all be-all cure for every single like business-related problem that exists, and but for sure there will be some applications where blockchain is going to just incrementally help the system, but in those ways, in certain sectors where it can fundamentally change how those businesses run, I think that's going to be the most exciting space and the biggest area for revolutionary progress with blockchain.
As everyone else, I'm also excited about the blockchain space. I think it can definitely bridge past the currency utilization. I've looked at it and studied it very, very carefully as far as the use cases, looked at many white papers of projects launching. I do really like one thing that Simone had mentioned about it being very useful for transfer of value, some type of a value. It doesn't have to be currency of money, but an asset. And that I think is one of the key things that I look for to say, hey, is this thing actually a good application of blockchain? Because there have been a lot of talk of just using it for, oh, it's just generally going to be better security for whatever that we're doing for our data, or it's just a better way of transferring information. Whereas that doesn't necessarily fit a blockchain. To me, it has to have some type of value associated with it. And if it doesn't have some type of value, then a blockchain isn't going to really disintermediate that. And then the second thing, which is what Lexy had brought up, is there need to be multiple parties involved. Right? There isn't much utilization of a blockchain. There isn't much of utility in it if there aren't multiple parties involved, and generally speaking, multiple parties that have at least a bit of distrust of one each other. Right? If you fully trust each other, then you're a big happy family. Then you don't really need a blockchain. So coming together with kind of those two primary nuggets is that you're trying to transfer something of value, an asset. If that asset is provenance, like knowing that this person owns this item in the physical world, okay, so be it. And then you want that to be through a network of people that normally wouldn't have a central point of trust. That's what we could really use it for. But like Lexy said, it's not an end-all, be-all of every business problem. And you have to look at it really carefully. Where I start to see is taking blockchain tech and not just making it an improvement, but making it drastically disruptive, is when whatever application is using blockchain tech, the more people that can touch it, I would define as the more disruptive it can be. If it's a thing that 5, 6, 10 entities that maybe don't trust each other, but are now utilizing this technology, well, somewhat disruptive. If you've got 6 billion people have the potential to touch it, to use it for whatever the use case is, now you have something very, very disruptive. Because if you look at the history of disruptive applications of technology, every single one took something that was a limited resource that only a few people had access to and made it accessible by the masses. Every disruptive tech we've ever had for hundreds of years has done exactly that, whether it be the printing press, the internet, or blockchain. So that's where I look at and I see, hey, is this thing that I'm going to be excited about, or is this going to be what I call incremental? And I am happy to see that there are definitely projects that are making things accessible to the hundreds of millions and the billions of people. And that's where we're going to see this massive shift and where the world really will change versus just getting improved.
Yeah, and if I would add one more thing, it would be that a lot of the times, the most impactful blockchain applications are where blockchain is not applied by itself. So just the blockchain layer, but it's actually combined with other very relevant technologies, like for example, IoT, right? So IoT or artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, or all these buzzword technologies, but that actually makes sense to apply together. So when you combine, for example, sensor technology with blockchain, you get really, really interesting use cases like provenance and supply chain, or when you combine blockchain identity with self-driving cars and sensors, then you have a car that has an identity that can actually talk to other cars and get filled up by itself and pick up passengers and get paid by itself, and actually have a self-automated contract, the insurance contract that gets paid when it crashes and things like that. So not only do I find blockchain relevant to other industries, but I find that it's maximized by its combination of other technologies.
I think that's interesting. One of the conferences that we went to, that was a major topic of IoT and blockchain coming together, where machines will be able to transact within each other. And it's, again, not just an application, but it's a merging of two different technologies.
So Simon, coming from ConsenSys and having a lot of background with Ethereum and with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance being a very big buzzword in the industry, what role do you see decentralized applications and dApp platforms playing in the future of blockchain?
Yeah, so I think dApps are, it's for everybody, it's decentralized applications, right? The dApps are basically the application layer of the blockchain. So you have the blockchain as the infrastructure, and then you build things on top of them for specific use cases. Examples would be, like we talked about, a provenance dApp would be an example, a prediction market dApp, an identity dApp. So I think that dApps are what makes the blockchain come to life. I think that Bitcoin, for example, is a very good application of blockchain, but in my mind, it's the currency application. Then you have all these different dApps that are coming together that actually form what actually, and basically realize the true potential of blockchain. And dApps are based on smart contracts the majority of the time, and so you have this ecosystem of thousands of dApps that not only add value by themselves, but they can also interact with one another. So at ConsenSys, we have 15 to 20 products or dApps that we are building, and a good example would be we have Uport, the identity platform, that is a self-sovereign universal identity where you can own own and build and your own identity. But not only is that powerful on its own, but other applications also take advantage of that identity platform to use it as the identity layer on their own. So if you have Ujo, which is a music platform for artists to connect peer-to-peer with their fans, it uses Uport to actually identify the users and identify the artists. So it really starts becoming really, really interesting when the ecosystem starts talking to each other, which is why I think, for example, why I'm in the Ethereum world, because I think this combination and this network effect of the ecosystem is what's actually really, really powerful about blockchain.
Awesome. There's going to be a question for Lexy. We wanted to know from your exposure in the blockchain community how we can get more women involved in the Bitcoin and blockchain technology space. As you can see, 100% of our executive board is all male, and we're trying to understand, what brought you and how's it like being a female in this industry?
Yeah, and thank you so much for the question. And I wish Perry Ann were on here as well, because she's definitely has been a role model for me as a female pioneer in this space as well. But yeah, I actually think that compared to most of the other niche technology sectors, I think Bitcoin and blockchain space has been very welcoming and fairly open. I think it's an interesting question to try to unpack, how do you make something more appealing to women when you've got such a diversity of interests amongst women in general. So it's a hard question to answer, and and in no way I don't want to serve as a spokesperson for my gender or anything, but from my perspective, maintaining a kind of maintaining the priority of the space to be focused on merit as opposed to existing just basically making the space focused on independent thought and knowledge acquisition, as opposed to what some of the other maybe male-dominated spaces have been focused on. But I think that's really the best way you can be welcoming to anyone, is to just make sure that you have a welcoming environment, and that something like computer science, which has been traditionally dominated by males. I mean, I've seen a lot of terrific female developers as well in this space. Like at Bloq, we have Jordan Kruger, who is one of the first female Bitcoin developers on our team. And so just understanding that women have just as much to offer as men do. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah, no problem. Any other question?
I'd love to chime in on that, even though I'm not female, as obviously, but I don't know the answer to this in all honesty. I don't know that anyone does. But the answer might lie in actually looking at other societies where the gender ratios are not not distributed the way they are in a lot of established countries like the US and the UK. Looking at India, there's about a 50-50 split in male versus female software developers. So I have not studied that demographic to see, well, what makes that environment much more inviting, at least more inviting relative to US, UK type of countries for engineering type positions, technical type positions, for their demographic. And that might end up being a piece of the answer, because obviously blockchain is very technical. It is a technical space. And as with any new technical space, even like the internet, it's going to draw people that are technical. If it happens to be mostly men in a place like the US, then I guess that's what happens. But it would be interesting, and it might be a great topic of study for one of the students over there at UF to find out, why is that? And why is it that way in other countries, especially from my understanding, India? And maybe that could be a piece of knowledge that we can learn from.
Yeah, over here at UF, we're going to try to partner up with other organizations and make this more accessible to anyone, any gender or any background. So it's things that are in our queue. I'm going to kind of turn around here, see if someone from the executive board or from the room has any questions for the panelists. Yeah.
Hi. So earlier in the panel, it was mentioned that Bitcoin won't be used to buy your coffee, but rather for infrastructure inversion. I was wondering about all of your opinions on microtransactions, perhaps through the use of off-chain applications like the Lightning Network or Raiden or something similar like that.
I generally hesitate to make statements such as like Bitcoin won't be used for buying coffee, because that's a really slippery slope to say such a thing. Because to say that, okay, if it's not going to be used for buying coffee, well, will it be used for buying a dinner? Will it be then used for buying a phone, a cell phone? Will it be used for buying a computer, right? You could take the extreme of a coffee of a few dollar items, but then at what point will it be useful? Will it be useful for buying a motorcycle, a car, a house? It's a real slippery slope to try to cut a specific line and say, okay, below this it's not useful, above this it is. So fundamentally, I do think that if it is to achieve its true level of utility, it will need to be useful for buying a coffee, whether that be using technologies like SegWit and Lightning, or by virtue of scaling block size to the point where we're actually able to accomplish a lot of transactions, 10, 20,000 transactions per second. I don't know, that can't happen today with the level of price for technology. Although with about a 40% increase in the cost of, decrease in the cost of bandwidth and storage, there's the potential that maybe in 10, 20 years we'll be able to encompass a significant amount of the transaction volume of just regular currency use. And I think that it's precarious to start saying, hey, it's only going to be used for underlying infrastructure. Because, like I said, if we really think that this is going to be disruptive, we need it to be accessible to the masses. And there's billions of people, and with billions of people, we're going to be creating billions of transactions. So if it doesn't touch the masses and we're not able to buy coffee with it, I don't think it's going to be as disruptive. It will be what I call the incremental improvement. The disruptive potential might take a while to get there. The scaling is hard, and that's not just Bitcoin. That's pretty much every blockchain technology. That's Ethereum. That's going to be Dash and Monero. All of them will have the same problems. Bitcoin just hit it first, But if we do want to hit the masses, we will need to solve scaling and not just push Bitcoin into kind of the Rails type of solution for existing financial.
So I agree that we do need to solve scaling, and I think your answer was mainly focused on, again, using it as a payment method, right? As a currency application. I think that when we look at, even though I don't agree personally that it'll be used for everyday transactions in retail payments, I do think that scaling needs to be solved, because if you think about the size and basically the perspective of everything that's value-based transfer relying on a network, on a blockchain, right? On a blockchain network to make all of these transactions. current scaling is nowhere near enough what it needs to be, including all these private networks, that claim to have 80,000 transactions and so on. That it's still not going to be enough, personally, because I think that the public network is definitely needed. So even though I don't personally agree that it'll be used for mass adoption retail payments, I do think that the blockchain will be massively adopted for other applications that will need the scaling, that will depend on scaling. So I think that those solutions like state channels, Raiden, Lightning Network, although all of them are still in beta, I think that's where things will happen, because on-chain scaling doesn't look like it's getting us there at all.
Right, and it's interesting too, because I think public perception of whether or not Bitcoin will be able to be used for smaller transactions. I recently saw, I think it was from today, an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about how the Bitcoin hype has kind of been overstated, and something that they cited was that cheapair.com has had the capability to take Bitcoin to pay for plane tickets, but that still less than 10% of users use Bitcoin to buy plane tickets, which actually surprised me. I thought that was an interesting number, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting for those smaller point of sale things. Public perception seems to be that the hype has sort of been overblown as far as buying your cup of coffee with Bitcoin, but I don't see any reason why in the future other currencies better tailored that would have more benefits as opposed to using regular money or fiat currency could be applicable, but who knows? It's interesting.
So it's probably rooted in what Simon had said earlier, is that payments aren't broken in the developed worlds, and so if they're not broken, people aren't going to use. They're not going to rock the boat and try to fix something that's not broken. Where payments are broken, Bitcoin can and should be used, but of course, if it can scale to that utility, that would probably be the biggest hindrance in being used in developing countries as an actual currency, is the fact that it's too expensive, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But you get started with the small players, and the big ones will follow suit. And I do fundamentally believe that, although I think the established countries would like to not believe that. But I do believe that you can start with the small players, the small countries, and having them adopt it, because really it is the better solution, especially with good scaling. There's no reason why not to. If that's what you're going to hold because that's the better currency, you want to hold that because it's a better currency because everything else is falling apart, then why not use it to trade? Right? If all your funds are there, then yes, you're going to use that to actually store value. And when you have a store of value, you will use it as an exchange of value. The only reason why you wouldn't use a store of value as an exchange of value is if the technology makes it inefficient to do so, such as gold. Gold is an inefficient exchange of value. It's a good store of value. Bitcoin achieves both, and any digital currency achieves relatively both. So that's where I think it can. We do have to solve the scaling problem, and it won't happen here in the U.S. That's the thing, is it simply won't. Our payments aren't broken here, but it'll start elsewhere.
For sure, and I think that the only caveat to that is holding Bitcoin and Ether and other tokens. Some people might see them as investments, and so you might, as deflationary currencies, and so you might not want to, that might also be one of the obstacles that these digital currencies face as scaling, as adoption comes to life. Because if you have a currency that is a good store of value and is actually appreciating in value, then you might not have the right incentives to spend it.
Well, that's only if there's something else for you to hold, and that it only goes for only so long can you hold something that's depreciating in value when you have something else that you can hold that's appreciating in value, right? The volatility is what's preventing people from holding more Bitcoin, because it can drop at a time when you need it. But as the volatility, and historically volatility is dropping, significantly dropping over time, then it becomes safer to hold a significantly larger portion of a person's wealth in a digital currency. And at that point, it becomes inconvenient for people to be utilizing a government currency. And I know people that have stated exactly this. This is actually becoming friction for them to use a government currency. So, and they're US-based people, but they're the purists. And so I don't really consider them the usual case. Right. But if you look at it from the viewpoint of someone who's not US-based and actually is looking at holding funds in digital currency because the other options are really, really inferior, then it would be friction for them to convert. And why wouldn't they want to transact? Well, they wouldn't want to if there's too much friction in the cost, obviously, and the cost is high today. You remove that, you solve that problem. I feel fairly confident it will be used as a currency and as a store of value. The two are not mutually exclusive. And I think that's part of this weird debate, the whole Bitcoin Unlimited segue. How are we going to use Bitcoin? How are we going to use digital currency? The two are not mutually exclusive at all. I fundamentally do believe that they're not. It's just a matter of, are you able to solve the problems, preventing it from being able to achieve one or the other? That's it.
Thank you, Paul. Antonio, for time, this is going to be the last question and possibly the most interesting one, because we're going to put this up on YouTube and we can see it in the future. So today's April 13th, 2017. If you could tell us what you see it being 5 years from now and 10 years from now, and if you could also speak not only for the industry, but the company that you represent. So for example, where do you see AirBitz 5 years from now? Where do you see AirBitz 10 years from now? And where do you see blockchain technology 5 years, 10 years?
Got it. 5 years from now, gosh, the scaling debate would really affect whether or not we're able to, how far will we get in 5 years? I think by 10 years, something will have solved it. I'd say in 10 years, we will see a cross-global digital currency that is used for payments. And it's going to be used for payments at what people consider kind of the small level, maybe not a coffee, maybe a computer, maybe cars, that type of thing. I think in 10 years, we will see that. Where do we see our company? Our big focus, you've used our wallet. I think that the fundamental properties of a wallet that make it important in people's lives are our key management. That's our big focus. How do we make private key management, which is one of the most unfamiliar parts of digital currency, how do we make that very usable to users? How do we make it very familiar to users? So our aim in 5 years is you're going to see a slew of blockchain applications like Augur, which is one of our partners, and Wings, and we just recently announced another partner with Lunar, and all of them Ethereum-based smart contract apps. You'll see a significant chunk of the blockchain dApps utilizing key management built by AirBitz. And we're trying to build an ecosystem to make it very, very familiar and simple for people to sign into these apps and unlock their keys using one set of credentials, scanning a barcode, single sign-on, the way people are accustomed to doing with like a Facebook and a Google, but doing it in such a way that there is no third-party intermediary that has access to your funds. It feels familiar, but provides all of the true key benefits of a decentralized blockchain. So that's where we see our company in the 5-year span, really empowering a significant portion of the blockchain dApps. And in addition to that, we foresee a really good encroachment of that technology into traditional applications that are not blockchain. We want to take people's digital data and secure it client side, where only end users have access to that data. That's something a blockchain cannot do. So we aim to really disrupt the security space and bring ownership of data back to the individual or small business, and away from kind of cloud providers that have full access to the data to monetize the data. We're taking the security model that's inspired by blockchain and in the future driving it to applications left and right. But we do think the blockchain is the key piece. We're excited about dApps. We're excited about other tokens as well. We think the token economy is going to take off. And hopefully, as Simone had said, we're able to really reduce that friction so people don't have to see so much of that. I have that token, this token, friction and conversion. And I won't say it's invisible in the future, but I'll say it's much more streamlined, that we can manage it and it'll be much more palatable.
Yeah, awesome. So great answer, Paul. I think that, from the ConsenSys side, ConsenSys does two things, right? It builds the infrastructure of the Ethereum ecosystem, and it also builds the decentralized applications that will go out and be used by the end users. So from an infrastructure perspective, we're still pretty nascent in the whole blockchain ecosystem throughout all blockchains, right? Today, to develop a blockchain application as a developer, it's pretty complex, and we're that's what we're working towards, right? We're working towards simplifying it and actually making it stable, secure, easy to go into, and so that's part of of ConsenSys's mission, and I think in 5 to 10 years that problem should be solved. It should be a more or less mature technology that is easy to develop and that is easy to interact between the different blockchains. So I think that piece of interoperability is key. And then from a decentralized application perspective, hopefully I see it as starting to get adoption in the next 3 to 5 years. I think that the B2B side and the enterprise side will come first, and the reason why it's because there are clear use cases where 3 to 5 parties that don't trust each other are working together to build a platform. So that in itself is it's although complex to solve, it's a shorter timeline than saying a massively adopted self-sovereign identity platform or a massively adopted music peer-to-peer platform. So those are very long-term goals that I hope will take place. But I think it'll start from an enterprise perspective, the adoption, and then take on through the consumer. But at the same time, while this is happening, the ecosystem keeps on growing. There's a lot more cross-pollination and really interaction between not only decentralized applications built on Ethereum but also other blockchains. So you have integration of Zcash into the different blockchains and other different types of integrations that make this a much more cohesive ecosystem, I would say.
Thank you, Simon.
Right, yeah, both of you, great answers and predictions. I think something that's really interesting to do when talking about blockchain is we're really on the cusp of a, and like we're as in like the people in this room, honestly, and everyone who's had as early an interest in it as we have, we're on the cusp of implementing a technology that's going to fundamentally change a lot of aspects of our society and fundamentally how we do things. So I think the most recent technology, which I think has been as pervasive and life-changing as that, has been the internet. So there have been a lot of comparisons as to blockchain's adoption. I hope that resonated, and blockchain's adoption and kind of how the internet was adopted. So at Bloq, and my co-founder, Bloq's co-founder, Matt Rozak, has said this a few times, but blockchain currently is in sort of a similar stage where the internet was in like early 90s, mid 90s, where you've got a lot of experimentation on private networks, sort of similar to intranets that were then connected to internets. So I think if everything goes well, I could see hopefully a lot of these like pilots and small demos going well within the context of single entities and single companies, and then eventually transitioning to a world where you don't just have these networks of one, but a lot of companies connected and touching on the same networks, whether that's a big, everyone's on the Bitcoin public network, or whether it's a bunch of private networks that are somehow interconnected through side chains or whatever. It will be interesting to see, but I think that's kind of the general trajectory where we're headed.
What about for Bloq?
Yeah,
what about for Bloq? Where do you see Bloq being 5 to 10 years from now?
Right. So I kind of touched on this, but our sort of motto is we believe that the world is eventually going to be multi-chain, multi-token, multi-network. So the token economy that Simon has touched on before, we think that it is going to be, there are going to be many different chains out there, and we're hopefully going to be providing some of the infrastructure on either private side or building applications on the public Bitcoin blockchain side. And then eventually there's going to be some interconnection between all of those.
We had a question here from this side, Lexy, about what token economy, what you meant by that.
Yeah, so having, this was kind of touched on by Simon a little bit, but eventually having an economy where you have different tokens that are used for different types of things, as opposed to you know, different payments, or maybe you have like, for example, at the state of Illinois with the Cook County deeds, we're tokenizing deeds and putting those on a blockchain. So that's part of one of the pilot projects that we're doing. So not necessarily just to replace regular money, but having different assets tokenized, seeing those through a supply chain or whatever kind of network.
Yeah, and I think that Paul talked about this earlier, how it's going to be value, not necessarily money all the time.
Right.
And we had laughed earlier, Lexi, because we saw a video of when the internet was first coming up. People were saying, what is this? We don't understand it. What's an email?
Right.
So we also have that hypothesis that we're going to be able to see this 5-10 years from now and kind of compare what we thought. So I want to take this time to thank all of you guys, Paul, Lexi, Simon, Simon. Thank you so much for coming. This is really great. We're trying to build a community here in Gainesville. We have a lot of really smart minds here. We want to get a very good understanding of not only what the technology is, but then what are next steps? How do we develop a DApp? How do we become leaders in our community? And this has been really helpful. I want to thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you. Go
Thanks so
build.
much for having us. It was great.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting this together. It's been terrific. Thank you, guys.
No problem. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.